Welcome to Authentic Expeditions, the podcast where we explore what it really means to travel with purpose in the world's wildest places. I'm your host, Sue Stockdale, and today's guest is a true trailblazer of the polar seas. Ashley Perrin has captained racing yachts all over the world and now operates as an expedition leader with Aurora Expeditions. From being the first female boating officer for the British Antarctic Survey on the Antarctic continent, to leading expedition cruises in the Arctic and Antarctica, Ashley brings sharp insight, grounded leadership and a deep respect for these fragile environments. In our conversation, we dig into the responsibilities behind the role of expedition leader, the power of citizen science, and why slowing down in nature might just be the most valuable experience of all on an expedition cruise. Welcome to the podcast, Ashley. It's lovely to speak to you today.
Great talking to you. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, you've had such a diverse and adventurous career. I'm really fascinated to find out more about it in our conversation today. When you were a youngster, what got you interested in the polar regions?
Well, my best friend, who I met through sailing, went to South Georgia with a lady called Sally Ponce, who's an amazing woman, sailor and ornithologist. And she went with Sally to help with an albatross study in the Bay of Islands after she'd raced around the world, single-handed in the Vendée Globe. And after that, she encouraged me to go there. And then I also graduated with a girl who went to work for Bass as a marine biologist. And then the last thing that pushed me to join Bass, the British Antarctic Survey, was that I met a guy on a bus in Laos in Cambodia when I was trekking there. And he worked at the American station in McMurdo. And I was at a point in my racing career as a race boat captain where I just needed to be in one place rather than traveling so much. So it seemed like the best place to be in one place was Antarctica.
I'm sure most people wouldn't have that top of the list if they were thinking about where to be based. But it's certainly an amazing and unique continent to be based on for a period of time, Ashley.
Yes, it was 3 years with Bass in the end.
And during that time, you were the first woman boating officer for Bass, I understand?
Yeah, just to be clear, there was a woman boating officer the year before me, but she was in South Georgia. And I was at Rothera at 67 South on the Antarctic Peninsula. So the first for Bass in Antarctica, the proper continent of Antarctica.
During that time when you were there down in Antarctica, what were some of the most memorable moments that you recall?
It was a great period in my life because there was a lot of good friendships, supporting science, learning some unique skills. My nephew particularly loved the fact that I was driving a crane. And great winter camping. It was just a privilege to be in the continent with just two of you on our winter trips with no one else around you. But yeah, certainly my nieces and nephew were quite young at the time. And I remember my nephew getting in trouble at school for telling fibs about his aunt, which turned out to be true. And my sister-in-law actually got called into school to talk to the teacher about my nephew's fibs. Yeah, very unique. But now to them, it's just normal. And to me, I guess it's pretty normal. But I guess the outside world thinks it's still unique to live there.
Yeah, it's certainly not an everyday job for most people, Ashley. So now you're an expedition leader with Aurora Expeditions. What does that involve? What does an expedition leader do?
So not allowed a lot of sleep. A huge amount of responsibility. The responsibility to the passengers, the expedition team, and the company, basically. And the job's very diverse. You've got personnel management, risk management. You're creating a narrative. You've got a responsibility to educate passengers through lectures, recaps, workshops. I love doing a lot of citizen science as part of the expedition. You're working within regulations of the regions that we operate in. And in the Arctic, you're working in partnership with local communities. And we have on board ambassadors and cultural specialists. And on a daily basis, you're weighing up weather and ice conditions, team and passenger capabilities, and you're trying to create safe operations that are varied for the passengers in terms of what they're seeing.
That's a lot to be responsible for, Ashley. And for the listener that's not familiar with the size of vessels that Aurora operate, how many passengers do you typically have on board?
So we max out at 128, and 28 of those are non-landing passengers. So purely activity passengers, they also land, but because our landing sites allow 100 people at a time, some 50, some 30, the company decided that it was best experience for everyone if we limited it to that amount.
That sounds like a sensible approach. And of course, you mentioned the particular nuances or regulations of different geographies that you're operating in. And those things are changing, of course, with perhaps an increased focus on sustainability and conservation. How do you keep track of all of those things to ensure you're operating within regulations?
Well, we are given a lot of paperwork to read. So in order to go to these areas, we have to apply for permits. So when we apply to the permitting authority, in our case, the Australian Antarctic Division, which is within the Antarctic Treaty Party, we send in our risk assessments, our contingency plans. And because we are members of IATO and IACO, we follow their operating procedures as well. So I will say that if it's Australians are more strict, then we must abide by the Australian rules. So we're basically taking all these regulations and all these rules and ensuring we have a minor and transitory impact on the continent. And these rules are based on decades of experience from multiple operators. So it's not just one operator, it's operators and scientists. What we don't understand right now, to be honest, is our cumulative impact with such a large increase in the numbers of people going to the continent. But we are continuing to receive our permits based on our procedures and how we're operating.
So given that adhering to those procedures is paramount, as you're describing, and I imagine also safety of passengers and crew and your expedition team is paramount, what do you do to manage the safety and the risks that potentially are in those types of remote environments that you're operating in?
Ironically, it's not as remote as you feel like it is, because if you look at the marine traffic going across the Drake Passage, it's starting to be like the M25. You would struggle in the peninsula area to not be within 2 hours of another vessel. And IATO creates its own search and rescue unit. And by creating its own search and rescue unit, you have pretty much more assets than a national government at that point. Now, if you go to the Arctic and you're looking at Northwest Passage, that is a lot more remote, and we can have a negative impact on communities because they're not set up for the number of passengers and crew on a vessel. If you go to South Georgia, there's only one way in and out by sea. So you don't have that fallback of a plane from KGI if the planes can run. So you do have enhanced contingency planning, and actually more so in the Arctic because you really don't want to impact those communities negatively. We can't impact in any way the science stations, so we can't ask a national authority for help because we'd be impacting their science. So you do have to be self-reliant, and as such, you make decisions based on that and the capabilities of your team. I will say Aurora's expedition teams are, I think, the best in the industry. We have a lot of skill sets within the team, and we do a lot of drilling and training. And medevacs are becoming more prevalent. And I think that's because people feel like if they go down on a ship, that's a luxury ship. Things are somehow going to be easier, but the environment's still the environment. And climate change is making it harder to operate. It's more extreme. So sure, we're becoming, I think, a little bit more cautious in our operations because of our passenger group and because of the numbers of people down on the continent.
That makes complete sense. I've had the experience firsthand of being on an Aurora expedition and the role of the expedition leader. What I observed was that rigour within which you're also preparing the guests on board for the unknown experience. How do you do that then, Ashley? How do you help them to get into the right mindset for the expedition cruise?
I'm pretty forthright and transparent. I tell them straight off to tear up that itinerary and not come to me with that itinerary in their hands because it won't go well for them. And the reason being is it sets expectations that you can't fulfill. And they're going to really enjoy the experience if they just let it all go and just let the people who are good at their job perform their job. So we don't have control. And I think in our daily lives, we think we have tons of control. And we do in a non-remote situation, we can just get in our car and drive to wherever we want to go. So I would say let go of expectations, be flexible, and trust that the expedition leader and the team have your best interests at heart and that you're going to have a fabulous trip. And if you do all those things, you're going to be in the expedition mindset. And that's key for everybody on the voyage, because I have seen passengers impact other passengers' experience by not just being able to let go.
It's such an important thing. And given that you do work in some of the world's most fragile ecosystems and you've been operating in those areas for a number of years, what have you seen as changes in terms of climate and wildlife in the places that you've lived and worked, Ashley?
So when I was on base, I started talking to yachts that came in and they said, oh yeah, the glacier face used to be here. And then you look at the chart and you're talking 2 miles difference. I started using radar to see what the ice face collapse was. And in South Georgia, it was 1.5 meters a day of ice face collapse. So we're seeing massive extremes. It's the canary in the coal mine. The Antarctic Peninsula has experienced that rapid warming, as I said, and it's 5 times faster than the global average. So the ice is melting, permafrost in the north is melting, and that means the wildlife is dealing with habitat loss, and that's resulting in migration, if that's possible, and changes in food availability. So some species are coming out okay. We're having gentrification of the peninsula. That's Gentoo, the penguin.
What a lovely way to describe it.
So they're coming out okay, but the rate of change is what's unprecedented, and the wildlife can't react fast enough to that. They've moved almost as far south as they can, and they're moving to the furthest depths they can. When I was on base, I was a science diver. So we were collecting marine organisms, and they were basically boiling them. And at 1.5 degree increase in water temperature, they were stopping reproducing. So stop reproducing, that's the end of the species. So we are seeing big changes. The other thing is that we're seeing more rain and less snow. And if you're a penguin chick with downy feathers, you don't do well with rain.
No, that's true. So you're noticing those changes. You mentioned a moment ago, Ashley, that you're a great proponent of citizen science. And I'm sure that passengers on board ship love to get involved in that. What are some of the projects that guests can get involved in?
We support Polar Collective, and their projects they run are Snow Algae Survey, Happy Whale, Fjord Fido, NASA Cloud Survey, Seabird Survey, Secchi Disc Project. And then on top of that, I really like to find specific to our destination. So Whales of Iceland, Clean Up Svalbard. And then we run a partnership with an app called the IC app, which you can take pictures of garbage. And they can actually see that on the satellite. It's quite funny when you press the app, it says recover or just say that it's there. And then it says, oh, somebody will come around and pick it up. So I'm not sure what time garbage day is on these places. But anyways, we pick it up. So it's a free activity on board, and you just sign up if it's a Zodiac experience, or you turn up if it's onboard survey or workshop. And I try and work at least one of those into each operation that we run.
So guests can get it up close and personal with doing something to support science.
Yeah, I think it's our requirement to do that. If we're going to visit these places, we need to give back in some way. And science in remote regions, particularly the poles, is extremely expensive. So we need to give back. And we do carry scientists on board as well for certain projects.
What is it that you enjoy most about your job?
I enjoy creating a narrative. I enjoy doing citizen science. I enjoy standing back at the end of an expedition and watching the slideshow and what has been created by the team, and looking at the smiles of the expeditioners and seeing that chat in the bar where everybody's at the end of a voyage, they've made lifelong friends, and just standing back and knowing that my team did that and I led that. And yeah, the end result is pretty special.
Do you think that expedition cruising has changed you as a person?
Has it changed me? Well, I've certainly got a little bit more patient, though my teams might say that's incorrect. But sometimes I do have to take a deep breath and maybe look at things from different perspective. It's changed how I lead, I think, especially with the younger guide groups, and what they expect from a leader is different, I think. I come from being a bridge background, so I come from being a sailor and a captain. And so I have a very vertical method of leadership, I think, than in comparison to other expedition leaders. So it's changed me. More patience, more ability to look at things from a different perspective, for sure.
And when you get back onto dry land and not in a polar region, does it give you a different perspective there as well, in terms of what's important or just how you're looking at the world in a different way?
I don't know. I mean, my other job is as a race boat captain, so I'm pretty much on the water most of the time. And just to give you an idea, in the last 3 years, I've been at home 23% of the time. I did that calculation. So I'm pretty much on the water all the time. And I see being on a boat like being on a penny. And that penny can move anywhere in the world's oceans. But outside of that penny is our world. And we are just in that penny. And everything that we have on the boat is finite. And we use it wisely. And it's, I think, difficult for me when I come back to normal society, if you're going to call it normal, I guess, Western society, to see how much waste there is and how much we don't really understand the finite resources we have on the globe. And I think it would be great if everybody had that perspective.
I'm sure it would make a huge difference. So it almost seems like home is where you are at any given moment, whether it's on a ship or an expedition ship or a racing vessel, then your home is there.
Yeah, I have a lot of homes. My husband lives in Southampton, well, a village called Hamble near Southampton in the UK. I have a home near San Francisco. My parents live between the US and the UK. So my life is pretty much about work. And my husband's very supportive and it works out well. So yeah, home's where my bag is, I guess.
Now, I know that Aurora Expeditions are running a number of specialist type cruises in the coming years. There's an Antarctic Women's Expedition cruise, I think, happening in 2027. Are you likely to be involved in that?
I don't know. We normally book our work with Aurora a year in advance. So I'm booked up till April the 11th, 26. So there's plenty of women leadership in Aurora. They do a good job with that. So maybe I'm involved, maybe I'm not. We'll see when I get the phone call.
What do you think will be unique about having an all-female group of expeditioners on board a ship? Do you think it'll be any different?
I don't think it will. No, I think it'll be the same. We'll be doing the same activities, but I don't see our passengers being different if they're a man or a woman in how we educate them and how we do an operation. I'm very lucky that I was born in the time that I was born. We have a Zodiac on the Sylvia Earle named Boyd, and she was a woman born 2 miles from my house in California. And in the 30s, she was the most wealthy person in the United States. And she blew all her money as an expedition leader. And at 18, she saw Amundsen come through the Golden Gate on the Yoa, having completed the Northwest Passage. And despite the culture of that period saying that's not what you do as a woman, she went and did that.
Well, I'm sure you're an inspiration for others around you in terms of what's possible for anybody to lead and explore these wonderful parts of the world that few people get to visit.
I hope that I inspire people. If I do, I hope I inspire them in a good way, for sure. Yes, I was inspired by particularly a few women to do my career. One of them was Tracy Edwards, and when I was 12 years old, I saw her race around the world with all-woman crew and decided that's what I wanted to do. So, yeah, I was confused by the other kids in my class that didn't have a goal. And I think having a goal in life and being inspired is a gift, for sure.
So given that you have spent your career on the water in different places, where do you see the future of expedition cruising going? Are there any new frontiers or trends that excite you or that you are noticing?
I'm noticing that we have a tendency to love places to death, for sure. And I think we do need to think carefully about how much more pressure we put on the Antarctic Peninsula in particular. I don't think it should just be for the wealthy people in the world, but I don't know how we continue to have 110,000 people come to the peninsula and not have an impact. I guess I'm doing myself out of a job by saying this. But as a super yacht captain and ice pilot, I'm very thankful for the fact that there's an increase in number of people coming to the continent as well. So I think all of us guides are constantly assessing our part in expedition cruising and the fact that we're burning fossil fuel to do this, and that is impacting the continent. So it's a conundrum. But I will say that I'm very proud of working for Aurora and that they are a B Corps, so they do take it seriously and they do offset the carbon emissions we're having. And I think if we do our job of educating people and creating Antarctic ambassadors, then we are doing some good to the continent. Northwest Passage, that's an interesting one. I mean, I'm doing my 5th this year, and I'm pretty certain Amundsen didn't think about 104-meter expedition ships going through so easily when it took him so long. And I do think we need to maybe even slow down a little bit more when we are doing these voyages to truly experience what's happening in the poles. I'd struggle with the 4-day go to Antarctica trips because I just don't think we can give people a full understanding of what the continent's about and do some science and educate them when we're just flying him in, taking him to a few landings, showing him some penguins, and then putting him back on a plane. I'm not sure that's what we should be looking for, but that's my perspective.
One for our listener to consider then in terms of that slowing down, so we can fully engage and experience an area in quite a different way than being more of a tourist, let's say, where it's a shorter experience.
Yes, for sure. And I think that's what we should be striving for, is really just slow down and immerse ourselves in the polar regions, because it's a privilege to go there rather than just treat it as a checkbox.
Finally, I just wonder if you can give our listener a sense of what it's like, either when you're standing on the bridge of one of those Aurora ships, or even you're on land in one of those remote places and looking around, experiencing the silence of the landscape. What does that evoke within you when you have the privilege of those sorts of experiences?
How really tiny we are as human beings. And the world will just continue. The ecosystem will just continue. The environment will just continue around us. And that has been going on for millennia, right? And we're insignificant. But actually, we are having, as an entire race, a significant impact on nature and the ecosystem around us. So a little bit of sadness, I think, for what impact we're having on the world. But also, it's just some awe. I still am in awe when I stand there and look out. I was standing on a point called Recess Cove a week ago on my own. Just created a flag route up and cut some steps in the ice for the passengers to come. And you just have this moment on your own, and there's an ice cliff that's breaking apart right next to you, and there's whales, and you can hear them in the water below. And it's pretty special, and that's when you decide that's why you do your job. Yeah, I'm here because of getting to have that privilege of just being for a few moments alone. Pretty amazing.
Well, that's a lovely thought to leave us with, Ashley. It's been a real privilege for me to speak to you, having seen the difficult job that expedition leaders have on board those small expedition ships. I'm in awe of the work that you do and the experiences that you create for the expeditioners on board. I wish you all the best, and I thank you for taking the time to speak to us today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, it was a great conversation. Ashley's honesty, insight, and leadership experiences reminded me that authentic expeditions are as much about mindset as they are about location. I hope it left you reflecting on your own relationship with control, curiosity, and impact. And if today's episode sparked your wanderlust, make sure you check out the show notes for details about this episode's featured cruise. Jane at Authentic Travel Company has something exciting arranged for us with Quark Expeditions. Whether you're dreaming of penguins in South Georgia or ice cliffs in Antarctica, you'll find the information to take that next bold step if you look at our show notes. Thanks for listening to Authentic Expeditions. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with another fellow traveller. Until next time, stay curious.